Knives and tools with corkscrews. I guess that's what this introductory video is going to be about. How did these different patterns come about and why do they look so differently? Why is this known as the waiter's friend, but this is called a bartender's knife, sometimes also called a champagne knife? And why are these sometimes referred to as a picnic knife? And where does something like this fall into? And there's plenty of knives out there with corkscrews. Why aren't they considered a bartender's knife or a waiter's friend? Does it take more than just a corkscrew to be referred to as a bartender's knife or a waiter's friend? I guess that's what I'm going to try and answer in this video, which is an introduction to waiter's friends, bartender knives, and picnic knives. So I'm going to start on the right here with this Laguille style knife and explain to you why this is a type of picnic knife. Picnic knives in general are a large frame knife, so something that is probably over 4.5 inches long, somewhere like between 4.5 to 6 inches closed. And it's a folding knife with a large blade that is suitable for food preparation. So the blade may be serrated, it may be just a fine edge blade, but it's usually a wider blade that you can actually do stuff with, like, and it's designed for cutting meats and cheeses and breads and stuff of that nature. It's not really for woodcraft or anything. It's really there for food prep. And then the other thing that the picnic knife will be a corkscrew. The reason it has a corkscrew is so you can open a bottle of wine, which was commonly taken out on picnics. And it differs from a camp knife in that it isn't really designed for, use while camping. It is just for a little day trip out of doors for a meal. And so that's why it's called the picnic knife. Let's move on to the waiter's friend. Now, the waiter's friend is different than all of the knives because unlike the knives, the waiter's friend was developed from a corkscrew. It was not developed on a knife frame. The idea was, how can we improve on a corkscrew? And that's where the waiter's friend comes in, and that's why it's got this little doohickey here, and later versions have this a little blade up on top here. The earliest ones did not really even have the blade. They just were an improvement on the corkscrew. And believe it or not, the pattern has been around since I believe like 1882. So it predates what are commonly referred to as bartender knives, but the picnic knife might be older than that. Now, bartender knives, also sometimes called champagne knives, and we'll get into that when I start talking about these in more detail, are built on a knife frame. That's really the difference between that and a waiter's tool. The knife began as some kind of basically a pocket knife, usually a medium to small pocket knife. And the idea was to add a corkscrew to it, and normally for the purpose of advertising something. And often it was advertising a brand of alcohol or something of that nature. And it was something that were often given to bartenders, and also that something that bartenders gave away to promote a product. And so it was basically an early form of advertising knife that really began life as like a penknife that had a corkscrew added to the backside. Later they became a little more fancy and everything else, but that's really why it was called a bartender's knife, and also because quite a few of them were used to promote champagne. I believe that might be where the term champagne knife came from. But like I said, we'll go into that in more detail when I start talking about bartender knives. Now, Levine likes to call these things bottle opener knives, but they're really a bartender knife as well. And it's just a later version of the earlier bartender knives. But a lot of people will call these things bottle opener knives. And it's basically, again, a little knife built on a small frame with a corkscrew, and in this case, a cap lifter added to one end. And I'll also talk about the difference, why so many people in the knife community refer to this as a cap lifter, while most people just refer to it as a bottle opener. And so finally we got the Spartan over here, and well, it can do everything that a bartender knife can do. I mean, it's got a blade, actually has a second blade there too, and it's got a corkscrew. Why isn't this a bartender knife? Well, mainly because it has so many other functions added to it, such as the reamer over here, so you can punch holes in leather, something that a bartender really does not need to do, and it does nothing to help sell a product or anything. So plus you've got screwdriver tips here and screwdriver tips there, so there's more to this knife than what you would need, than a typical bartender would need for a pocket knife. And I guess that's really what the difference is these knives here really have two functions. Well, these three knives here really have two functions. They can cut stuff and they can open a bottle of wine. Beyond that, they really don't have many other uses. Sure, you could, MacGyver it in some way and do more than that. And as for this knife, really, this blade, while you can do many things with it, there's really just one function that blade is made for. So everything about this knife involves bottles of wine, really. And that's why it's referred to as a waiter's tool. But you'll be amazed at the other things that you can do with it once we start talking about it in more detail. But that kind of gives you the genesis of these various tools. You've got the waiter's tool, which was designed around the corkscrew, versus bartender knives and picnic knives, which were basically designed around a blade and given a corkscrew so that it would have that one added feature. So these were really designed for cutting stuff. The bartender knife really was your basic pocket knife that just about any bartender would have had back in the early 1900s, that they would have just had in their pocket for cutting cardboard or anything else. And it's like, hey, let's put a corkscrew on the back so you can also open bottles of wine in a pinch with it. Because let's face it, the bartender has a corkscrew at the bar other than the knife, than the corkscrew on the back of his knife. But the picnic knife was thought out as something for the purpose of going on a picnic and having an all-in-one tool for cutting your food as well as opening the bottle of wine. So that is the basic introduction to this. I will go into more detail as I explore the pattern more in depth and show you the way it has evolved over the years. So that'll be in future videos. But hopefully this quick introduction to the bartender knife, the waiter's tool, and the picnic knife sheds a little light on these what I consider really interesting patterns and knives that I actually enjoy collecting.